Minato Namikaze, the future 4th Hokage, the Yellow Flash. He may have an easygoing and kind personality, but behind that smile, behind that facade, lies something else. Minato is a machine, a killing machine. He is one of the deadliest ninjas in the history of Shinobi, and has developed what is the most lethal form of battle in Naruto. So today, let us talk about that. Minato is the only ninja that we know of that got a flee on sight order during the Third Great Ninja War. This is sort of a throwaway line, but a lot of people give it a lot of credit for a good reason. Imagine you see someone in the battlefield of a major war, and just by seeing that person, your orders are to retreat and fly away. Get as far away from that dude as humanly possible because you are going to die. That's what a flee on sight order is. The Stone Village, and by extent Onoki the Tsuchikage, knew that his shinobi had no chance against Minato. They were just going to die if they faced him. So he just told them, yeah, just go back, retreat. If you see the guy, don't do anything. We're just gonna lose our soldiers. The first guy that Team Minato encounters didn't realize that was Minato up until the last second, which was his greatest mistake. If he had fled, it's likely Minato wouldn't have pursued him. But that is the first time we get a glimpse of what Minato can do, of how he crafted his shinobi art to the utmost limit to maximize the amount of damage he can dish in a second. We don't know exactly how many people Minato killed during the Third Great Ninja War. A lot of people say he killed 1,000 stone ninjas in that Kakashi Gaiden flashback arc, but no, there was a battalion of stone ninjas that he disposed of, but that was not 1,000 ninjas. There's a filler episode in which Onoki says that they sent 1,000 stone ninjas and only one was enough to take care of all of them, which was Minato.
We sent 1,000 of our shinobi. It took just one of them, namely the Yellow Flash.
But one, that was filler, and two, that was not the same situation as in the Kakashi Gaiden arc. Also, we don't know if Onoki is referring to a single situation when Minato took care of 1,000 ninjas at the same time, or if he's referring to the entire war effort and the amount of ninjas Minato disposed of during the entire Third Great Ninja War. But regardless of that, I think we can assume that Minato killed at least 1,000 stone ninjas during the entire Third Great Ninja War. And you have to remember that they were not just fighting against the Stone Village, they were also fighting against the Cloud Village. So imagine how many more of the Clouds Minato got. His lethality was off the charts, but how did he accomplish such thing? What makes Minato different? Because yeah, there are several extremely powerful ninjas, some that even match Minato's abilities or even surpass him, but he wouldn't call them as lethal as Minato. Someone like Hashirama, for example. Yeah, in terms of raw power, sure, Hashirama beats Minato, but when it comes to this finesse, this assassin type, Minato is probably top one in the verse. Well, everything starts with his core characteristic, speed. Minato is the fastest Naruto character up until the War Arc, essentially. He's recognized by his speed, and I'm not even talking about the Flying Raijin, I'm just talking about his sheer movement speed. That's already going to make him very difficult to deal with. When you eclipse 99.9% of every single opponent you're going to encounter in terms of speed so much that they can't even see you moving, that obviously means you have a massive advantage over them. But obviously that's not just it. Minato doesn't have only his sheer speed. He also has the Flying Raijin, his signature jutsu that allows him to hop from mark to mark instantaneously. This jutsu is not only good for offense but also defense. He can essentially escape pretty much any attack by just flying away. And because it is so fast and it happens instantaneously, it's just very difficult for you to hit Minato with anything, which is a good point that increases his lethality. And you may say, wait, what? Why does his defense increase his offense? Well, if you get hit and you die or you get really hurt, you can't attack anymore. Imagine Minato taking on the army of stone ninjas, but he gets wounded in the third ninja he's fighting against. Then he's no longer going to be able to take care of the rest, right? His lethality is going to decrease substantially. So Minato takes advantage of that and uses the Flying Raijin offensively and defensively, and many times simultaneously. He attacks and defends with the same Flying Raijin jutsu, like when he got Obito with a Rasengan, for example. He dodged out of Obito's grasp and landed the Rasengan using one Flying Raijin teleportation. But going back to his primary weapon, it's a kunai, that fancy looking kunai with 3 prongs that has the mark. He uses that a lot during his fights. And that's obvious, right? It's a pre-marked object. You don't have to touch anything else to mark it. You can just throw the kunais around the battlefield if you're expecting to fight against somebody powerful or several opponents at the same time, and you have a battlefield where you can hop to anywhere essentially, attack from any angle, dodge out of pretty much any attack. That's how Minato disposes of the stone army that we see in the Kakashi Gaiden flashback. He tells the ally Konoha ninjas to toss several kunais in the direction of the stone ninjas, and then Minato's gonna take care of the rest. One of the ninjas even says, well, you shouldn't blink because you're gonna miss it. And that's exactly what happens. It's so fast. Minato takes care of the stone army really quickly by hopping from kunai to kunai, using the teleportation speed on top of his physical speed to slash and kill every single enemy ninja. When he fights against A and B, he tosses several kunais around the battlefield to do the same thing. B tries to come up with a counter by trying to predict to which kunai he would jump to, using the maximum speed he had access to try and reach Minato before he could hop away, but Minato comes up with a very clever counter and he marks Killer B's tail instead and bamfs to Killer B. And that's the thing, Minato trusts his kunai slashes/thrusts very much, because he hardly ever uses his Rasengan. The only time we see pre-War Arc Minato using the Rasengan was that one time he hit Obito with it. Now obviously there's the Minato one-shots when Minato learns the Rasengan and uses it against the Nine Tails, but for the most time he just uses the Flying Raijin and the kunais. And that seems to work really well for him because he literally cuts an entire tail of the A-tails with a kunai slash. I don't know how he does that because that thing is thick and the kunai is, well, the size of a kunai. It's way smaller than the diameter of the tail, but it cuts through the entire thing. I guess his kunai slash is just that powerful. Minato seemed to be very confident that his kunai would be able to pierce through A's lightning armor, something that Sasuke's Chidori barely did, and that was a jutsu, not just a kunai. When Sasuke attacks A with his sword, for example, another blade, he doesn't do anything against a lightning cloak. So I guess you could assume that Minato's slashes and thrusts with a kunai would be more powerful because of his speed, being able to perhaps even pierce the lightning cloak of the future 4th Raikage. And obviously this is going to be very deadly. Now, at this point, Minato may look like a one-trick pony. Okay, you toss your marked kunais around and you mark your opponents and teleport to them and slash them with your kunais. That's what you do. But that's simply too effective. Think about this for a second. If you cannot perceive Minato because of his speed, and if Minato's kunai can possibly cut through the lightning cloak of the Raikage, then there isn't much the average ninja can do. Even the average jonin, who is supposed to be pretty powerful, is not gonna be able to do anything against it. Well, that's pretty much what happened against that guy that Minato caught after Kakashi tried his Chidori for the first time. That guy was a jonin, and there was nothing he could do. And there's the thing, bladed weapons are disproportionately powerful in Naruto and in shonen as a whole. Because you're gonna get tired of seeing characters getting punched or getting struck by bludgeoning strikes that flung them a mile away and opened craters on the ground, but they are not terribly hurt by them. But then that same character that withstood such a powerful bludgeoning blow takes a slice with a sword or a dagger or whatever sharp implement, that character is gonna get cut by that thing. And if that thing passes through the character, it's going to impale him. And you don't have to do that very forcefully. No, you can just do a regular thrust. Take a look at Ten Tails Madara, for example. He withstands a Night Guy from Might Guy. His final attack, yes, sure, he obviously takes damage, but he survives that thing. And then Sasuke's sword just passes through Madara like it's nothing. Sasuke didn't even thrust his sword, he just swapped places with it and impaled Madara with it. Ten Tails Madara, who survived Night Guy. So you have to agree with me that cutting implements are just much more effective than other things in the Naruto universe, and this is kind of a shonen rule as well. So Minato takes advantage of that and uses kunais, which are gonna be disproportionately effective against pretty much anyone he fights against. And let's be real here, even when we're talking about powerful ninjas, many of those ninjas are not gonna have very clear defenses for a blitz kunai slash. Like in theory, even Hashirama could be killed by one of those things if Minato managed to take Hashirama's head before he realizes. Or Madara. I mean, they're probably going to react and realize and defend themselves, but a powerful kunai slash, if that thing is able to cut through the entire A Tails' tail, yeah, there wasn't a full A Tails' tail, it was like an appendage coming out of B, but that's still pretty thick. I don't see why that's not cutting through necks of powerful ninjas. Combining that with your Flying Raijin, when you can essentially strafe in and out, Minato slashes and teleports away. If the slash misses, that's fine, he still teleports away and flees. He doesn't give his opponent a counterattack, and if somehow his opponent counters his slash, he can also mark the opponent himself, which is actually gonna make it much more difficult for them to react to the Flying Raijin teleportation. But what makes Minato's fighting style truly lethal is the philosophy he uses to go into fights. Now, I want you to dive deep into your memories and remember every single Minato fight. What do they all have in common? Well, I guess you can say Minato used the Flying Raijin in all of them, but something they also have in common is that they are very quick. It's almost as if Minato's character is all about him being quick. It makes complete sense. The only exception to that is the fight against Ten Tails Obito, when Minato's not technically the main character in that fight. He's a support character, that fight's long, but in every fight Minato is a main character of, that fight is quick. That is Minato's fight philosophy. Very different from his son's Naruto. Naruto is going to use shadow clones and bum rush you, but if he has to spend your chakra and run you down, he will. He can use 2,000 shadow clones to try and run you out of chakra, because he is not gonna run out of chakra. Minato, on the other hand, doesn't have that luxury. He has to fight in an extremely different way. While Naruto can be inelegant and essentially throw everything to see what sticks, Minato has to be extremely precise, elegant, and quick. He doesn't have the same amount of chakra that Naruto does, for example. And no, I'm not saying Minato is like chakraless or anything, that he has a pathetic chakra reserve, but it's certainly not as much as in Uzumaki. So if he wants to take powerful opponents, or several opponents at the same time, he needs to be quick about finishing them off. Especially when fighting against an entire army, he needs to quickly dispose one after the other, maybe two at the same time if he uses two kunais to slash. But he cannot dwell too long on a specific duel, and he certainly cannot get hit by anything. That's why the Flying Raijin is so important. And that's exactly the fighting style he develops for the Third Great Ninja War. They're gonna be fighting swarms of enemies. The Leaf Village is being attacked by, that we know of, the Stone and the Cloud Village. We know the Mist is up to no good as well when they capture Rin and everything. So the Leaf Village is essentially fighting against every single major nation during that war. We don't know about the Sand Village, maybe the Leaf was not fighting against them, but it feels like the alliance the Leaf makes with the Sand in Naruto Part 1 during the Chunin exams is something recent. After all, we see Kakashi and Obito's Chunin exams when they were kids during the Third Great Ninja War, and they were no other villages, so the Sand were not their allies yet. And if the Leaf is fighting against so many opponents at the same time, Minato is going to have to develop a way of fighting that's going to let him dispose of large amounts of enemies very quickly. He's going to have to be brutal, deadly, elegant, and precise. And that's exactly what he does. He cuts, he flies away with Flying Raijin, teleports to the next one, the next kunai or whatever mark he has, cuts that one, goes to the next one, and keeps on doing that until the entire army is disposed of. Let's be real here, most of those guys are not going to react to what Minato's doing. They're gonna be dead and they're not gonna realize what happened. And that's exactly what Minato wants. He wants to increase his speed to the maximum so that he decreases risks for himself and disposes of the enemy faster. However, there are going to be enemies who do something to counter Minato, and if that happens, then Minato is going to have to use the Flying Raijin to teleport away. That's what happens when Minato faces A. A is extremely fast, almost as fast as Minato. So obviously in a duel like that against a more evenly matched opponent, he's going to have to concentrate much more. He can't simply do this extremely fast kill 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 until the army is done. Otherwise, he would get killed. But his philosophy remains the same. Because he doesn't have that much chakra to spare, he cannot linger for too much. Now, we don't know exactly how much chakra the Flying Raijin spends, but because Minato used it so much, a single charge of Flying Raijin doesn't feel like it's gonna spend a whole lot of chakra. But the more you use it, the more it's gonna pile up, and Minato obviously does not have infinite chakra. And the bigger what you have to teleport, the more chakra you're gonna have to spend. That's why Minato took a little bit longer to teleport the entire 9 tails away from the Leaf Village. So Minato will have to be quick about disposing of his opponents, even when they are powerful. When he faces Obito, the night Naruto was born, he realizes whoever touches the other one first is going to win. If Obito touches him, he's going to Kamui Minato, and Minato cannot escape from the Kamui dimension because it's a sealed off dimension, even if he tries to hop to a kunai in the material world. But if Minato manages to attack Obito as he is not phasing when Obito is trying to touch Minato, that's when he can win. So even in that scenario, Minato realizes, okay, the fastest one is going to win this, and I have to be quick and finish this very fast so I can go to the Leaf Village and take care of the 9 tails. His philosophy still applies there to the Obito fight. And it's also going to apply to the fight against the Raikage, for example. I mean, Minato had B at his mercy by the end of the fight. And that took only a few pages of fight until Minato had his kunai to B's neck. And in universe time, that was probably even shorter. That was probably like a couple of seconds because of the insane speeds regarding that fight. We see the guy next to B looking terrified as if something had happened that he didn't even realize that happened. Oh, okay, so this guy is right next to B now and is about to kill him. That's crazy. And then there's that entire thing of Minato respecting the Raikage and B and liking them even though they were enemies, and then he doesn't kill them and goes away. And no, it wasn't as if Minato didn't want to kill them. Obviously, he would do so if he had to, but the way they justify Minato not going through with it and not killing B and executing him in that place was essentially because B managed to aim his own sword back at Minato as Minato was aiming his kunai to B's neck. Which to me just doesn't make sense because Minato could do the exact same thing he did against the Raikage on B at that point. Remember, when the Raikage dashed at B, Minato just left a kunai hanging in the air so that he could go away, make the Raikage miss, and go back to that kunai once the Raikage had passed that kunai. So he had a clear shot, and B saves the Raikage from that cut. But Minato could do the same thing here, right? He could just leave that kunai hanging in the air, teleport away, B would miss his strike because Minato wouldn't be there anymore, and then Minato just comes back to the same kunai and then slashes B. So it is much more likely that Minato gave them a little bit of mercy there. He had some sympathy for his enemy at that point, which I guess it was a good thing because eventually B teaches Naruto, Minato's son, to master the 9 Tails' chakra mode. The only problem with Minato's combo of Flying Raijin Kunai slash repeat is that if you have an opponent that has a pretty powerful defense, a kunai is not gonna cut it, pun intended. And yes, as I said before, it managed to cut through an entire tail of the 8 tails, and Minato was confident it was gonna cut through the Raikage's lightning cloak. However, that was not the Raikage yet. He was a Jonin of the Cloud Village. Perhaps his cloak was not as powerful. One thing is for certain, there are certain jutsus in the Naruto universe that are going to block Minato's kunai slash, no matter how powerful you think that is. I just don't see a single kunai slash, for example, passing the Susanoo ribcage and cutting through it. I don't think that's possible. I mean, Danzo tries to do that against Sasuke's ribcage and his kunai just breaks. And obviously Danzo is not Minato, but it's an example. So when Minato faces that very rare opponent that is going to counter and block his kunai slashes combined with the Flying Raijin, he has something else up his sleeve. The Rasengan, which is going to deliver much more force to the attack. And yeah, you may say that sure, the Rasengan is strong, but it's not something like a Bijudama, for example. Minato's base Rasengan is probably not gonna break through a ribcage. However, you're forgetting something. Minato can blitz you from all sides by teleporting to several marks and hit you from all angles several times in a second. We see Minato doing that in the video games. He never really does that in the anime or the manga, which is frustrating, and he kind of says several times, I'm gonna use that jutsu that has a long name that I don't even remember at this point. That he's gonna try against Ten Tails Obito, but then Obito breaks his kunai and takes one of his arms and he never uses the jutsu. But if Minato, for instance, hits a ribcage with his Rasengan several times in a second from all sides, I don't know, maybe the ribcage is gonna crack and you can actually hit whoever is within. And that can also be applied to all other types of protective jutsus. Even something like the Raikage's Lightning Cloak. If Minato's kunai wasn't enough at that point, if he went for that cut and the kunai just was blocked by the Lightning Cloak, the next move would be the Rasengan. That's kind of what Sasuke does. He used the sword doesn't work, his next move is the Chidori. And yes, Minato can't use that as much as the kunai combo because the Rasengan spends much more chakra. But that's the thing, Minato is only going to use the Rasengan in very special occasions. As I said, the only time he used it before the War Arc in the manga is against Obito, which he thought was actually Madara freaking Uchiha. And in the one-shot manga, he used it against the freaking Nine Tails. In the War Arc, he uses it much more because he is an Edo Tensei and has a limited chakra, so he doesn't have to worry about that as much. But with all those things, Minato is essentially unbeatable and he manages to dispose of his opponents very quickly. Flying Raijin plus the kunai slashes, and if the kunai slashes don't cut it, you go for the Rasengan. However, if Minato were to face some extremely high-level threats, the Rasengan by itself wouldn't cut it either. And that is the only time when Minato is going to face a problem. Pretty much in every other scenario, the opponent is not going to beat him whatever he has. Obito had Kamui, arguably the most broken jutsu in Naruto, and he could not beat Minato. Yes, there was a very young 14-year-old Obito, but he was powerful enough to make Minato think he was Madara. But sometimes it's likely the Rasengan wouldn't do enough damage, simply speaking. And no, Minato never has a 1v1 against a character like that. The closest he gets to that is the fight against Jubito, where obviously his Rasengan wouldn't do much against, well, first just Jubito because he nullifies the Rasengan and ninjutsu. But if he used Sage Mode, for example, the Truth-Seeking Orbs would easily negate the Rasengan's damage. Those are the only opportunities when you can actually kill or defeat Minato in a fight, when you nullify all of his arsenal. And even if you can withstand the slashes and the Rasengan, there's a very high chance Minato is just gonna run away and you're not gonna catch him because he can teleport out of the battlefield. The guys are slippery, you can't catch him. But Minato had an answer for this, actually. For opponents that would counter his Rasengan. He intended to develop his Rasengan into something else, something better, to finish the jutsu he created. He meant to imbue it with his nature transformation. Now, according to the data books, Minato had access to Fire Style, Wind Style, Lightning Style in release, and Yang release. That's a lot of releases. But because of the thematic and Namikaze meaning wind wave, essentially, he probably would develop a Wind Style Rasengan like Naruto does. But unfortunately, his plans are cut short by his untimely death. Minato was only 24 years old when he died the night Naruto was born. He was very young. He was younger than me. And if you take a look at other characters when they reach their prime, many of them reach their prime in their 30s. Minato would obviously develop much more as a shinobi, and he probably would develop the Rasengan into something else. He wouldn't be able to use the Shadow Clone Army method that Naruto uses to expedite the training time, but because he's a genius, he probably would manage as well. He just needed more time. And developing a jutsu like that will essentially upgrade your Rasengan from an A-rank jutsu to an S-rank jutsu. It's an exponential leap in strength. You can just compare a regular Rasengan to a Rasen Shuriken. It's night and day. Imagine Minato having something like that. Now, I'm not sure if Minato would develop the exact same thing Naruto did with the Wind-style Rasen Shuriken, but whatever Minato develops, it would probably have the same properties as the Rasen Shuriken, that cutting property that hits millions millions of times in a second essentially. And that could be a good way to circumvent whoever manages to counter a base Rasengan from Minato. It would have made Minato even deadlier, and obviously Minato would have developed in other areas as well if he grew older. If you want me to make a video about how powerful Minato could have become, definitely let me know in the comments. Watch this video right here to find out why Minato is actually a Mary Sue, but that works! Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring notifications too. Those are very helpful and it takes only 5 seconds for you to do them all. And thank you so much for watching.